I developed a checklist, which I call my intercultural or international negotiation checklist. Uh, I find this very useful. It's a huge topic, and there are many aspects of this, but to simplify it, I think a checklist makes a lot of sense, so that whenever you go and negotiate interculturally or internationally, you can simply go through the checklist and make sure that you have covered each of these topics, so you at least know that you've covered a major part of what you could come across in negotiation. It is of the utmost importance that you can you just go through each of these. Maybe there's a lot of Google, a lot of these aspects that you can Google, and you can also find very informative YouTube videos which will help you to make sure that you are well prepared for each of these variables. So let's go through and just very briefly, I'm going to try and keep this presentation under 15 minutes so that you can quickly have a quick look at everything that I have in my checklist. The first point that I have there is the contracts, the legal aspects. Whenever we negotiate, it's possibly a contract or an agreement that will be reached. Now, we have to realize that legal aspects are different for each and every country that we go to. And it's important that you study the very specific legalities of the country in which you plan to deal with. Also, each and every culture has got its own body language elements, things that could be upsetting for people, something that could be distracting, or something that could be misunderstood, which are all extremely important and could cause you to react differently than you're supposed to react, or when you think there's an agreement where there's no agreement, or vice versa. The whole communication system, the language, the way you talk, what you talk about, the topics you cover, all of these are of utmost importance when you prepare for the specific place you're going to. To form proper relationships with people is very difficult interculturally. It's also even difficult in the United States, but it's more so difficult if you cannot understand people properly, if you have to maybe speak through an interpreter, if you have only met them for a short time. To really form a proper relationship of trust and of flexibility and of visibility. So I think one should go out of your way to sometimes improve the relationship so that you also get more information in this process, understand the culture better, and can always in future rely on this relationship to get you through difficult times. I think we often don't understand the importance of seniority. In the United States, there's not so much emphasis on seniority and class, but in some cultures there's extreme sensitivity to class. Even the British are very class conscious community, society. And the same way in India, there are even castes, and people don't even speak across certain castes, and they will never marry across castes. So these castes will keep you in certain classes, and you'll find that communication is almost impossible in some cases, people from different seniority. And you also have to respect that the people you address in the negotiation, that you follow the correct procedure. I have found in India often that it was very difficult for buyers in one company to say no to a supplier because the supplier representatives were of a higher class and a higher caste, and therefore it was almost impossible for them to disagree or deny them access to the market due to their seniority. Etiquette is an important thing. You must understand that in the United States, we have a certain etiquette in terms of greeting, in terms of respect, in terms of our table manners, in terms of anything we could do during such a negotiating exercise, which could include lunches, it could include social and functions. And it's often useful to study some of the etiquette in the local countries. Whether you speak to males and females, how you address them, the eye contact, apart from the body language aspect. Table manners could be important. You know, in America, we have a certain way to eat in the table. It's useful. There are great YouTube videos that you can study. It is polite to change, to put your knife down and to put your fork in your right hand. But if you go to these high-class restaurants or clubs in Britain, for example, like White's or Brooks, which really, you only find the really high-class royalty, people associated with royalty, you find that if you use any other manners than strictly British knife and fork type manners and know exactly what you're supposed to do next to the table, which is extremely formally set out, you may find yourself embarrassed. Not that you will maybe often get in such situations, but one should also be aware that if you go to Japan, make sure that you can eat with chopsticks, as the restaurant will seldom be able to supply you with anything else. If you cannot get the food in your mouth, it's going to be kind of embarrassing. The time that we visit another country and the timing could be of huge importance. Some countries have a siesta time. Some countries have their times of holidays where you definitely don't go. No one will be there. In Japan, the first weeks in May are called the Golden Week. Everybody goes home. The companies even close down. You can virtually do no business, although there's a great time of the year to go to Japan. It is not a great time for business. Also, the timing of the month. It's often said in the United States, if you go and you purchase a car close to the end of the month, people are more desperate to sell motor cars and are more flexible in their pricing. So time and timing is always important, and even more so when you negotiate in another country, to study this properly. It's important that you know that you can bring your money out if you make a deal or an agreement to start a business or a franchise or something in another country, or you merge with a company in another country and you negotiate for some supply or purchasing agreement or importation or exportation, that you make sure that you will get your money out and you can bring your profits out, and you understand the tax system and the exchange system. That can be quite tricky, but just make sure that you understand exactly what the financial implications of the deal that you're going to make. Lastly, there's always an ethical principle in all the deals. People's ethics differ. In some cases, the deals are made when there is some smoothing of the deal through something we may easily, in America, may be against the law, in terms of bribing or extra presence or something you could be handing over to the other side, which is quite normal in some places, but in America could be totally against the law. Just make sure that you do everything in such a way that is not embarrassing to the other side, but on the other hand, it's within the law of your own country, that you do not get into trouble. But certain kind of gifts or presents are acceptable in most countries. Small gifts, small tokens, company-related tokens, lunches, dinners, those things are often well regarded. In some countries, even expected that you will bring some of these along with you. Let's go a little bit deeper into the legal differences in some of these that I've just referred to. I just say the law of contract. It's different. In some cases, they don't even have paper. In fact, they could often view the paper or contracts and forms that you sign with all sorts of clauses, penalty clauses, and so on. Even if you refer to that, regarding you do not trust the other side. And where in some countries they still don't use any paper, they don't use contracts. It's still done verbally, and people trust each other, and they could even be regarded that is an insult if you insist that they sign the contract that you brought along with you. Just also understand the law of contract is different from country to country. There's whole contract law that's different. We mostly adhere to the Roman Dutch law, but in many countries there is no such a thing as Roman Dutch law. And so that contracts come to being in a different time, different manner than in the United States. Understand the Company Act. If you go to some countries like Botswana, for example, you must realize that when you start up an organization there, you have to give 51% or 50% of your shares to the government. In some countries, it's even 51% to the local population where you want to set up your company. It's not. It's most African countries do not have that requirement. I know it is the case in Botswana. I know in some other countries too, but I do know in Kenya it's very easy to set up a company, also in Nigeria. But in specifically, I have dealt with people in Botswana quite often, and there it's requirement by the law that the government will take 50% of the shares of your organization if you start up from a place like the United States and want to start a company over there. So understand the Company Act. You must understand that some countries do not have companies as we understand what companies are. In Cuba, there are no companies really, the way we see it. And there are co-ops, and you can deal with individual people or groups of families, but you cannot, there's no company you can deal with. So understand also the limitations and the problems you may have to get your money out of the place, and if they owe you money, how you're going to litigate in these cases. How you're going to transfer, if you have to transfer people, realize a lot of legal implications in terms of work permits. You may not fire people in some countries unless there's a quite elaborate process that you have to go through before you can get rid of them or lay them off. Americans have often found a lot of difficulty with this. Whether you can get your money out, as I said before, and get your money into the country, and the implications of the exchange rate. Labor laws are different. Make sure that you understand it. Normally, contracts add a place of litigation, that if you have problems or conflict with the company that you have made a deal with, and because we should always remember that there could be problems in the future. And if there is a conflict of any kind, how are we going to deal with it? It's often done in such a way that people write in the contracts processes like negotiation, mediation, arbitration before litigation. And even in the case of litigation, it will be specified which country will be used as litigating country, like London, like the UK, but where you also have to understand that the court system is different. They do not have juries, they have judges, and there's a slight difference in terms of the ability to prove guilt is different in some countries, where the onus lies on the state to prove you guilty, where in some countries the onus lies on the accused to prove guilty, whether you're guilty or you're innocent. But it's complicated, and there's whole years and years of study involved in this. The best we can do is to just make sure that we are ensured that our negotiation will run smoothly, and we will not be surprised later on. Patent laws are different. In some countries, people don't have strict patent laws. Third world countries, they don't necessarily adhere to United Nations laws in terms of patents. And while, yes, in first world countries, normally your patents are pretty safe if you have registered the patents prior in that country. But often people think that if they have registered the patents internationally, that third world countries, they will be safe, which is seldom the case. Not in all the cases, but one should make sure before you start explaining and telling people about your patents. Shareholding, I just discussed that before. Let's now go to the next slide. Mandates, sorry, the last one is mandates. Just remember that the person you negotiate with, make sure that the person has the mandate to make decisions, and make sure that you have the mandate to make certain decisions. If not, do not just adhere to the law of mandate, because if you do not have a mandate, you still sign the contracts, or they do sign the contract while they don't have the mandate. There may be legal implications. Normally, if you did not know that they did not have a mandate, you are pretty safe, but just make sure that the mandates are in place. Now, body language, very interesting. It's often discussed in many ways. I'll just go through this quickly, as we have discussed in class. A lot of the body language aspects, we just want to talk about the differences of certain countries. Gestures are different. It's worldwide. It changes with every single country you go to. I just know in India, when I was there, people would shake their heads sideways, and I would think they would disagree with me. But in fact, it means agreement, while it's not really a sideways shake totally, but it's a kind of a bobbling of the head, and which made me think that they disagree with me, while in fact it was actually approval and agreement. So you can be fooled by the hand signs, the finger signs, the eyes, the head, whatever gestures, and may think that it is negative or positive, while it could just be the opposite. Postures of people. We spoke about space, and that will be different in many, many cultures. The way people greet is totally different. It either includes some touching, form of touching, and some not touching at all. It depends how, in Japan, how deep you bow to the other side, depending on the seniority. It is relative to many aspects, also in terms of gender. It will differ whether you greet by hand or you don't greet by hand, you greet seated or not seated, you stand up or how do you act, how do you greet, what's the procedure. It differs really almost from culture to culture. Eye contact, some people, it's quite a big issue, and we tend to learn from childhood that it's good to look people in the eye, and because that's a sign of honesty, and while looking away can often be an indication of shifty eyes, or maybe that people are not that honest. But there also could be cultural problems if you make eye contact with some individuals, with females in Muslim countries or in other places. You must be very careful and just make sure that you've studied this before you go there. Just make sure your dress is in line. Rather dress better than dress up than down, but make sure that you're properly dressed, and it's easy to Google that and find out before you go there. There are huge gender differences, and make sure that you do not cross the space that is allowed for gender differences. People's facial expressions may be wrongly interpreted. Make sure that you are a little bit aware of that in each of these countries that you go to. And also in terms of touching, some people it's totally inconceivable, and others it is quite common that you could touch each other and hug and touch each other quite often and frequently. Let's go to the next one, communication. Language is an interesting and very tricky thing. How do you communicate language? And you're not supposed to be able to understand it, but then you have to work through interpreters. No one expects you to be able to speak all the languages of all the people. It just makes it so much more difficult if you work through interpreters, and realize that it's rather more important what you say. There's a very nice YouTube video, which I'll show you just now as we just end off, which I thought is extremely humorous. But what one say is of extreme importance. Don't talk about politics. Don't talk about religion. Don't talk about your sport. No one understands American sport in other countries. They're not interested in that. They're pretty, they have their own sport, and it's only in America where they play American football, and not many countries play baseball either. Then be careful of your jokes. Your jokes is something that is almost impossible to translate in another language, another culture. So be careful of that. As I rather say, just don't do it, because you may find that although it's extremely laughable out here, nobody even give you a smile, and that may be very embarrassing. Don't talk about any sexual aspects, all right? That could only, just stay away totally from that, and just realize that people's values are different. They have very strict and sometimes rigid values that one should not cross. I hope this little checklist will be of some use for you. Also in doing your little quiz that I've given you after this, but not only that, that you can maybe use in future. Just quickly check all these things before you engage in an overseas venture. Let's quickly see if we can maybe quickly bring that video up so that I can just